Hi, thank you for joining us this afternoon for Get Out the Count, What is Being Done. So today for our Train the Trainer module, I'm going to go through the next section of our persuasion slide deck and give you the inside scoop, the skinny. I'm going to talk about everything nerdy that I know that I can think of to prepare you to give this part of the presentation. And we're going to talk about how different partners are integrating into the Census Counts Coalition and the Census Bureau and how those working parts come together and hopefully give you a lot of good background information. So let's get started. So here I talk about the Census Bureau. The Census Bureau has offices all around the country, and they have partnership specialists, which are new this year. And those partnership specialists are supposed to talk to us about different initiatives of the Census Bureau, keep us informed. They are supposed to have at least one partnership specialist for every area of the country. They don't. The Census Bureau has been really struggling to hire folks. So, and there is a cat behind me. So you're not crazy, there is an animal behind me. This is the office is not off limits, so apologize for that. They've tried to hire these partnership specialists all across the country, but turnover is pretty high. I've repeatedly asked the Census Bureau to give me a list of partnership specialists, and they won't because the list will be immediately out of date and moot. In theory, these people are out there and they're here to help us. And I'm about to go through some slides where we talk about how to contact them, and I'll give you some background information about how that really works and how that's supposed to work. We do encourage people to go to the Census Bureau website. We want them to, in part because they have lots of really nerdy information about how the data is used. So I signed up for the emails so I can give examples during a presentation. So the Census Bureau asks this and this so they can see the average age of a woman's first baby and how that has changed throughout the decades. So in 1950, it was a very different age than it is today in 2020. So it's stuff like that, and which is one of the reasons why I do encourage you to go to the Census Bureau website and play around. They are a big bureaucracy. They're not necessarily entirely transparent very often. Sometimes it's very hard to find information. It's all there, but sometimes you have to dig a little bit. But the Census 2020 stuff is usually pretty good, and it's a separate URL. It's not just census.gov, it's census2020.gov, or maybe it's 2020 Census, more likely 2020census.gov. So we encourage you to take a look and poke around and see what's out there. Let's go to the next slide. So these are the regional offices that you should be able to, in theory, contact to find a partnership specialist. Sometimes that does work, sometimes that doesn't. So these 6 regions are spread around the country, and they're supposed to have 248 offices across the country. Whether or not that's actually happened, no one can really tell. And one thing I will say about the partnership specialists, most of their training is supposed to be the same, but I will often get a different answer from different partnership specialists. Trying to think of a good example. I will before this training video is over, but you can ask one to answer a question, and they'll give you one answer, and then another one will give you a completely different answer. So in situations like that, I err on the side of caution. There was one recently that I will come up with, but that's difficult because you're supposed to be able to rely on these people for solid information, and sometimes it just isn't there. That being said, each region has contacts. So Julie Lamb is a regional director in Los Angeles, and in theory, if you want to find a partnership specialist and you're in Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, or California, you should be able to email Los Angeles Regional Office at census.gov and say, I'm a community action agency, I'm in Boise, Idaho, I'm trying to reach a partnership specialist for resources and knowledge about what's happening in our field, in our area with the census. We've been hearing that not all these offices are being responsive. So I have a couple of other ways to reach folks. We have all of these slides in here. You can pick and choose your region. Clearly, we give all the information because we do this stuff nationwide. Chicago is the region that we've heard the most problems with lately, but that's not to say that there aren't other issues. So the alternatives, I had somebody in Michigan who's been trying to reach the Chicago Bureau for a few weeks now and no response. I sent her here. So I sent her to the Census website to find a local complete count committee. And I did that because we know that the people on the ground are doing work. And these complete count committees are by town or by county, so you can find people in your area. And often the Census Bureau people that do exist, the partnership specialists that are active, are attending these meetings. So you might not be able to reach anybody at the regional office, and I wish that you could, but it's not the end of the world. Instead, I push people to the complete count committees because these are the folks that are physically doing the work on the ground. There are two kinds of complete count committees. Mostly I talk about the local ones because it's far more relevant to folks than talking about the statewide ones, but the statewide ones do exist, and they bring together all the statewide partners that can help impact a complete count, whereas the local committees are the smaller towns or the smaller counties that are doing work. It's more hands-on. So I feel like they're more useful. And I tell people that if they want to plug into what's already happening for the census in their neighborhood, this is where they go and this is who they should reach out to, because these are the folks who are actually physically doing the work on the ground. If somebody can't find a Census Bureau employee, it is certainly not the end of the world, because we do have this fabulous network of people and complete count committees across the country who are doing really amazing work right there in town that can probably answer any questions that people have and can provide resources that the Census Bureau would if you could reach them. This is a map, and this is the most up-to-date map since we're recording. And it shows, I mean, clearly there are far fewer people in the wider areas that the population is a little bit sparser, but there really are complete count committees all over the country. I really love this program, which is one of the reasons we co-opted it for the Community Action Complete Count Committee, because it's just a really great way to organize people, and I'm really a little obsessed with it. Okay, and then I talk about the Census Counts Coalition. So this is the coalition that the National Community Action Partnership has joined. And I mention these folks for a few reasons. First of all, it's really cool to be in this room. Like, this is a really powerful group of people who are all pushing really amazing things. I mean, it's not just census work that they do, it's the census project that we're involved in. But some things that come through the listserv that we're on, I push to Ryan Gelman, our Senior Associate of Policy, because they're valuable connections for us to be in that room. But it's also a very good cross-section of America. So you have Arab Americans, you have Native Americans, Asian Americans, African Americans, people with disabilities. You really have a cross-section of America represented in that room, and all of those voices coming together for a common purpose. They also have a lot of resources. So if you're struggling to find resources with something, I like to mention this page, because if you're trying to figure out how to talk to the Asian American part of your community and you're really at a loss, I know that these folks have the answers because they've either done the research or they've been putting together these materials and they know their own constituencies. So it's been a pleasure, first of all, to work with them, but second of all, we're all sharing the load, and that's been really cool that we're not all doing the same thing repetitively. Instead, we're sharing the burden and we're all bringing our own unique talents to this group. So I do talk about this because it's a resource. I have found Burmese language translations, and I'm about to get a few more Burmese sub-languages like Karen and Chin from this coalition, which is something that we couldn't do as a partnership. It's not in our population base to do a translation for anything other than English or Spanish, but there's also no need because these folks have those resources. So that's why I mention this group and how I talk about it. They do have a website. The website's not always perfect. It's sometimes really convoluted, but censuscounts.org/resources is where things are supposed to be. I always tell people to contact me if they need something they can't find, and I extend that to all of you for sure. I mean, if somebody asks you for something and you can't find it on there, A, I've done it a little bit more. I'm familiar with it. B, I have some back roads that I can find information. So I do often encourage people to take the pledge here. To be honest, I'm more interested in people playing with the Census Bureau website and being familiar with that material, and knowing that we have these resources that the partnership can access for you. But I often do keep this slide in there. And then this slide, I talk about those partnership specialists. I do want people to try to find those partnership specialists because that's what we've been asked to do. But I also know those workarounds, and the workarounds, again, are going to that complete count committee and finding whoever is sitting in from the census at that complete count committee. I do not know if they actually do have census branded giveaways. I have seen water bottles and t-shirts, but it really depends on where you are in the country. MQAs is the Mobile Questionnaire Assistance Program. We're recording this in early March, and I really have no idea what's going to happen with the coronavirus and COVID-19. If things get bad, which they very well might, the mobile QAs, which are supposed to be vans that travel around to undercounted areas that we as agencies are supposed to be able to funnel events to. Right now, the guess is that those operations will be pushed back from their March 30th start date into April. But if things go completely south, there's a very good chance that they will be canceled or otherwise rerouted or pushed back even further. So we'll probably come out with an updated slide deck as we know more information about that. I do want people to contact the partnership specialists because I do think it's important to have that connection in case there is something that we can do. And there is a mobile QA questionnaire assistance van that can go to a Cinco de Mayo party that you know is happening in your community when you have a high undercounted Hispanics or something like that. I think it's an important connection to make. We also on this slide talk about the rest of our coalition members because we're not the only ones in the field. There are other agencies and other entities that have brick and mortars out there, or they have an office, excuse me, or they have an office that they're doing work out of, and they can connect, and they have other connections to other nonprofits. State Voices is a good example of somebody that's often very useful to reach out to. They have what they call state tables in 23 different states. And those tables have nonprofits from around the country, from around the state where they're coordinating and orchestrating. So if you're interested in finding people who are doing nonprofit work and for some reason they're not involved in the Complete Count Committee, you can go here and tie into the state leads and hubs. Excuse me. The other part about the state leads and hubs, this is the same reason that I'm excited that the national partnership sits at the table with the 2020 coalition, is to build relationships for future work. Excuse me, I don't want to cough in your ear. Tickle. Something caught in my throat. So I encourage people to take a look at who's doing some of this connection work for the census in your areas, because it could lead to future partnerships and future community building efforts among partners when the census is over. So that's where we talk about this. This slide, I've recently updated this to include some of the logos to talk about some of the programs that we do where we can do outreach work for the census. I want people to know what we're doing as a partnership because I think a good overview is useful. So I talk about how the first 6 months of this project were really education and awareness of the census, and now we're doing the mobilizing piece and training people to be able to to train their agencies about the census. So I would like to talk about that. I also want to talk about the resources that we have. I have very talented people working at the partnership with me. I can't design anything to save my life, but Lauren Martin and Alexa Hayes are whizzes at that, and Johnny Italy. All three of them help me with the memes and the posts and the graphics and all that kind of stuff, and building the flyers and the resources that we have. We do have that graphic design ability in-house. We also have a graphic designer we use out of house as well, but for the most part, the census stuff has come from in-house, which I'm really proud of. And they're able to do something else. I mean, we've done some custom pieces for folks. Some people want their logos. Some people want, you know, a specific area map to show the area that we're talking about in rural states. So there are a couple of features that we've been able to do. And so I bring up those resources. And then the bottom line is that what we're asking everybody to do is to kind of have a census plan and to figure out how to seamlessly integrate the ask to fill out the census into everyday conversations that you're having with people anyway. So we're trying to make that effective and easy. And so that's what the logos are on here. Tax awareness, we're still several weeks away from tax day. And VITA volunteers, if they can mention the census, especially now that the census is dropping and people are getting their forms, it's a really easy segue to say, great, we've just finished your taxes. Now let's talk about the census. Because some people think that the census is overly intrusive. Either they don't know that it's only 10 questions or what the 10 questions are. But if you put it in the context of, well, you just did your taxes and they asked about your income and your earned income tax credit and your children, it's a little bit easier to frame that. So we encourage that. Weatherization programs, we're asking to bring postcards and literature to families and houses that they visit. So we have that. LIHEAP is a great example of how the census impacts literal dollars that are coming in because the census numbers are baked into the formulas. So all of these things are ways that we can make inroads into our populations. Our website is communityactionpartnership.com/census-2020. Secret is communityactionpartnership.com/2020 census also works. They both go to the same place, and we're redesigning that pretty much daily because there's just so much new information and we're building new resources. So that's really your one-stop shop. We know that this Train the Trainer has a lot of those materials all in one page. And so that's also a really useful method to find things. The Complete Count Committee, I don't know that this needs to be in a presentation that you do for your agency. You're probably a member of the Complete Count Committee already, which I'm grateful for. We have over 450 people that are on that. And it's really, it's our way to touch every agency to make sure that every agency has knowledge of the census and the materials that they need to do this work. That was the goal, to have one advocate, one census evangelist. I don't expect everyone to be as nerdy about the census as I am. I'm here for you, so let me be nerdy and ask me questions. But we do want some kind of information going into every agency. So I don't know that you need to include this slide in a presentation, but that's why it's in our presentation. Our Moodle Academy. So we're building out the Train the Trainer on the Moodle Academy right now. For right now, we are. This is a good primer. There are 3 modules. It's Census Basics. It's how to talk about the census. So it goes through frequently asked questions and some background information. And then it talks about how to make a difference. So how you slip the census into the conversation. It's pretty straightforward, and it can, we say it takes 2 hours. It depends on how fast you work, but it's really not all that intense. And it's work at your own pace. So you can do a little bit at a time to get through there. We want people to do this for a couple of reasons. We use Moodle Academy for other programs, so the learning communities uses it extensively. And so we are trying to boost the use of this throughout the agencies for online learning. But it's also a great primer. So if people are interested in learning more about the census so they can answer questions on their own without having to come to you, you encourage them to go do this so they have the answers at their fingertips. These are our materials, the graphic design that I'm not capable of. The one on the far left is a poster. And we've got 11 by 17, so we've printed English on one side, Spanish on the other. The one in the middle is just basics. And then on the flip side, we have the hotlines in all 13 languages, plus the URL, which is my2020census.gov. So the middle piece is great if you're going to do a mailing for the upcoming LIHEAP cooling season. So on this page, I try to talk about how you might be able and willing to use some of these materials. The posters can go in the window, pick your language. The buttons are great. I'm a former political nerd. I used to work campaigns, and so buttons I had no idea would be really, really fun for me. But the buttons that say "Ask me about the census" are great, and they're a conversation starter. So for that, we're encouraging people to wear them. I mean, just wear them every day in the office. If they're, on Census Day, we're encouraging people to have everyone on the staff wear the same color shirt. Red has been the suggestion because the buttons are blue. But if you can wear a red shirt with this button that says, "Ask me about the census," then it's going to make a statement because everyone's doing the same thing. So we also have weatherization postcards. It's weatherization and transportation. So your drivers and your weatherization workers can leave a postcard at every house they go to. It has a huggy heart and it has a simple message. We have a rural postcard flyer because we know that rural America is different from everywhere else. So we have that as well, and a couple of other fact sheets. We have coloring pages in English and in Spanish, where it's a coloring on the front for the kids, and then they take it home to mom and dad or their guardian, and that has an information sheet on the back about the census and English and Spanish. So we have those languages covered to encourage information, to get information into the hands of parents. Trying to think what else we have. We have a bunch of materials, and again, we can create more. So I go through this and talk about how these things can be used. All right, and then we talk about how people can do things. So at this point, we've talked about what the basics are, how things are working, and then we talk about how people can get engaged and involved. Ideally, you can have a staff meeting and you can show this slide and have a conversation, the who, what, why, and how of your agency. We do have a brainstorming exercise. There's a separate module. It's called the brainstorming workshop, I think. And it's similar to doing that. It's a longer version of this. But if you think about who's in your community that's going to be difficult to count and what their major concerns are, why they might be unwilling to count, you can really start a great conversation about how to reach these folks. The best example I have is a small town in Idaho that has 200 people, and they're folks that stick to themselves. They're just not friendly, outgoing people outside of their own community. They don't trust very much. They're kind of people who sit on their front porch swinging, drinking a beer with a shotgun. It's that kind of an image. But they rely on our community action agency that's 2 hours away for everything. And so when I did this exercise in Idaho with them, with that agency, they had to think about, well, who goes up there? The Postal Service brings the food. Okay, and then there's a bartender in town, and everybody, all 200 people, go to the bar. So if they can get the postal employees who bring the food supplies up from the food pantry and say, hey, here's your census form, make sure you fill it out because it helps you get these supplies. And if you can turn the bartender into census evangelist, so every person he serves a drink, he also serves a side of census, that's how you can convince that community, because those people are trusted messengers. So if you have time to talk to your colleagues and the people that you're training about this, to figure out, okay, who's going to have trouble with this? Why? Are they afraid they're going to be deported if they fill out the census? Are they afraid that they're going to get in trouble because they have 6 people living in a Section 8 housing voucher apartment that should only have 5. Like, what are the rubs there, and how do you get past those barriers? It could be really helpful to come up with a good group plan for your agency to do some of this work. These are the maps, right? Yeah, sorry, there's things over the screen. So the maps, we have an entire section on maps, which is why this slide is new for me, because I updated it because we do have an entire section on these maps. There are 2 mapping systems out there. One is the City University of New York, CUNY map. It's called the Hard to Count map. The other one is Rome, response area mapping. I always get it wrong. Rome. So the Rome is from the Census Bureau, and they are talking about response rates. So they have each area of the country shaded a different shade of green. It's useful if you're out in the field and you've got people who are doing weatherization programs and they're going out to East Main Street, and you can see on the map that East Main Street has a lower response rate than West Main Street. So that's how that can be used and useful. The CUNY map has multiple overlays. It's intense. It has all kinds of mapping features. You can see where there's low literacy rates. You can see where people don't have internet. So you can see through that mapping system where your problem spots might be and what they might be, which goes back to the last slide where it informs who makes up your hard to count and what their major concerns or problems might be. If somebody's being pushed to the internet to do a web survey and they don't have internet access, then they can't do a web survey. So the maps, which again, we have a whole section on, are really great ways to identify some of that stuff. This is the hard to count map by CUNY. And this is response outreach. I always get it backwards. Response outreach area mapper, it's the Rome map. And so you can see the different shades of green. And all of those are different scores. So a score of 25 to 29 means that 30%, up to 30% of that population doesn't respond. A decent response rate for the census is somewhere around 80%. So states like Iowa and Nebraska do really well, and their response rates are usually around 80, 82%. Whereas in New Mexico, for example, we have rates that are far lower. And it really depends on geography and the populations that are there. All right, so here I start to talk about messaging. I sometimes really scare people when I say we want 7 touches. The reason we're looking for that number is because we just want it everywhere. And here I usually talk about Burger King commercial, because marketing principles are the same across the board, whether you're talking about politics or you're talking about sales or you're talking about the census. So when I talk about 7 touches, I feel like I do scare people at first, but then I try to explain that what I'm going for is a complete plan, right? So you have a sign in the front hall, you have a button on your staff members, you have postcards in the lobby, you have one of our short videos on the CCTV. All of those things add up to touches. And so when you create a plan, I want people to be able to think and say, how can we put the census in front of all of our customers as many times as we possibly can, aiming for 7. So that's what this is all about. And again, if people have the energy and the bandwidth to throw a census party, I'm not going to say no. But what I want people to do is just layer it in. So you come into and you're working on somebody's TANF form, and you say, hey, we've got one more form. Have you filled out your census form yet? Can we help you with that? And then you do it right then and there because it takes 10 minutes. And it is time out of your day, but you can also set them up on a computer out in your lobby or set them up on a phone. We do have some messaging research available. So we have found overall that the best overriding message for folks is that filling out the census is really great for your community, and it brings benefits to your community. And we found overwhelmingly throughout all of the market research that's been done by the coalition, which includes encouraging families, parents and guardians to fill out the census and include their children and their babies, because kids 0 to 4 most commonly missed. For some reason, people forget maybe not forget their babies, but they leave off their babies. So they did research on why that is and how that happens and how to remind people to include their kids. But then they also talked with African Americans and Asian Americans, Native Americans, and Hispanics to find out what their barriers were and how to best get what messages moved them to be like, oh yeah, the census is something that's important that I really need to do. So we have those links to all of that market research, and it's in the persuasion deck. There are 2 slides for each group that we've recently pared down a little bit to make it easier. But it's things like African American millennials tend to think that it's the most, they think that the information can be achieved by other purposes or other means. They think the Census Bureau can find information in different ways. And they can, and they do. They quality check with other information on the regular. The way I think about it is that if you participate in a poll before you go to the elections, your polling place, and some research firm calls you up and says, how are you going to vote in the election? And you say, I'm voting for Joe Smith, but you never actually go to the ballot and vote for Joe Smith, it doesn't matter. It doesn't count. And so it's kind of the same thing. So even though you might think it's important and think that the census needs to be filled out, if you think that the information comes from somewhere else, you won't do it yourself. And so we know that we need to engage African American millennials in knowing that the actual form is important. It's kind of like casting a ballot, which totally doesn't violate CFPG rules about not talking about elections. It's a completely different thing. And the other thing about this slide is that I reiterate here that the reason we're asking people to say these things is because they're trusted. The people trust them. Their voices, like when everything goes to hell in a handbasket, pardon the expression, what do? You go to community action, and community action helps you. So that's why I mentioned that here. We have a bunch of training videos. In fact, we have some relatively new training videos. We have the original one from Derek Simpson, which is 7.5 minutes. On this slide, I push people to the Derek Simpson one from Long Beach, which is the yellow tie on the left-hand corner, because if they have nothing else to do but 7 minutes of watching, this is what they should do. And then the other ones are all short. They're all under 2 minutes. And we talk about how to fill out the form, why to fill out the form. We talk about counting children. We talk about all kinds of census concerns. We have 2 in Spanish that address what's not on the form, meaning the citizenship question. We have learned through market research that you shouldn't just flat out talk about the citizenship question, which will not be on the census, but a lot of people don't know that. Instead, you have to kind of couch it. You can't just say it won't be on the census form. You have to say the census won't ask about social security numbers or bank account numbers or credit card numbers. That's the kind of couching you need to do, because if you highlight the citizenship question, they'll hyper-focus on that and be like, oh, citizenship question again. Whereas if you kind of slip it in there, it kind of enters the subconscious without raising alarm bells. These are videos that we encourage people to just watch, just so they have that information, but also these are great tools to share on social media, closer to television, those sorts of things. Oh, there is messaging in this one. All right, we've rejiggered some things. So the best message across all groups is that the census helps your community. So we do have this full research online, and it goes through all of those groups, the families, and then African Americans, Native, Asian, Hispanics. With a lot of these groups, it's important to not only mention that it helps your community, but if you can mention a specific program, it works much, much better. So African Americans, it's Medicaid and food stamps. With parents, it's child care services, it's transportation for kids, it's education. So people are always complaining that our education is underfunded in this country. For the most part, it probably is, because people don't count their kids. And so if you miss a 2-year-old, you've missed their childhood. So I like to use examples like that, because that kind of drives it home for folks. and helps them relate to the people they're talking to about this stuff. The other thing we talk about a lot is fairness. We're not trying to take resources from, robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's not what we're doing here. We're making sure that our communities get their fair share. Because when you're undercounted, it means that the places that do better counts get more resources than you do, which isn't fair. And we talk about, the effects lasting a decade, which again, kids' whole childhood, right? So action steps, I like to give people summaries so they know what to take away, right? So nominating someone for the CACC, probably not your audience, you can delete that line. You can encourage people to reach out to the Census Bureau, or you can just simply talk about why you have reached out to the Census Bureau if you're the one who has done that. Anyone's welcome to go to a complete count committee meeting. So if he is interested on staff, they are more than welcome. Anyone we can turn into a census evangelist is really great. Census jobs, they are still hiring. I don't know when they're going to stop. I would have thought that it would be the end of March, but we'll see. Things are really in flux right now. We do encourage people to either apply for census jobs or to encourage their customers to apply for census jobs. Part of that is that there are areas of town. I worked on a campaign in St. Louis, and I was not allowed to go to North St. Louis by myself. I'm from German and English. I'm German and English. I am pale and white. I would not do well in an African American community like that. I was never allowed up there unescorted because it could have been dangerous for me. And so the reason we encourage people so much to apply when you're local is because we want people who sound like you, who look like you, who know the local culture, local customs, can shoot the breeze with you on the front stoop. We want people to be comfortable, and so people are more likely to answer those questions. The questions that people consider prying information if it's somebody that they know, or at least somebody that acts and looks and sounds like them. We want you to create a plan of action together. I mean, that's the idea, right? We want you to train these folks on how to do this together. So they have buy-in, and so they know what to do and what's happening and why they're doing it. So we do encourage you as a group to do that. And we provide materials. So we have these downloads. We can send printed materials to you. You can download them all from our website. You can send them around to staff so people have them. If there's a two-pager of frequently asked questions, that's just a good primer to have on your desk. So if somebody asks you a question, you can refer to it so you know how to talk about the census. I always end with social media because that's the day and age that we're in. CA Partnership is the handle for Twitter and Instagram for the partnership. We have all kinds of memes. We encourage you to join on some of those and retweet and repost and share. Our census newsletter, you're all obviously probably on it already, but if people want to know what's going on with the census, we try to keep it higher level. We keep the more nitty-gritty stuff to the complete count committee, but we try to keep it for people who are doing this work in the field as they're interested. And then this Facebook engagement group has really taken off the past couple of weeks a little bit more. It's a safe place for people to ask questions and make suggestions and tell people what they're doing. Case in point, recently I was asked about a Facebook frame. And so now we have 3 Facebook frames that say community action counts, count me in, that go over your profile picture on Facebook. So we really rely on you to give us ideas about how to do this work better. Some of us have definitely worked on the ground in agencies, and some of us, like me, I haven't. And so I rely on the expertise of the people I work with to help me figure out how to best empower you to do all of this and to empower your agencies. I always ask questions, or let people ask questions. I always try to let people ask questions because if one person has that question, other people do too. So I always give time for Q&A. And then I always give resources so people can find these things easily by themselves. I always try to remember to share the PowerPoint when I'm done so people have this stuff at their fingertips. And I have hyperlinks embedded in all of our presentations so people can find the information that they need pretty quickly and easily. And then I give people my email address. I'm not always speedy with getting back to folks because I travel a lot. I mean, right now we're all grounded to the end of March, but and so I've been a lot faster with email. But for the most part, I try really hard and I have a team. So if you can't reach me with a question, you have backup. Lil and Lauren are both great and can answer questions or find me. And then Jim and Alan are also wealth of knowledge, so they're useful. And so I go through how to contact people and ask additional questions. And that's kind of it. That's what we're doing. So I hope this has been really helpful. If you have questions or comments or suggestions on how I can make this more helpful, please do contact me. My email address is lmarsh@communityactionpartnership.com. Thanks for watching.